This is a closer look with the monitor. I'm Craig Blumenschein from Prairie Public. The North Dakota Military Gallery was envisioned as a world-class addition to the State Heritage Center in Bismarck, a place to honor veterans, preserve military history, and attract visitors from across the country. But just 1 year after groundbreaking, construction has stopped. The project, which depends on a combination of public and private donations, has raised only a fraction of its fundraising goal, prompting lawmakers to question what comes next. Joining us for a closer look with the Monitor is Amy Dalrymple. She's the editor-in-chief of the North Dakota Monitor, and she's been following this story closely. Amy, welcome back to a closer look with the Monitor.
Thanks for having me, Craig.
Glad that you are with us. This is an important story for our state, Amy, I feel. Bring us up to speed, if you will. What exactly has happened, and why has construction on the military gallery literally been halted?
On Friday, the State Historical Society announced this temporary pause in construction, citing insufficient funding. Specifically, it's the private funding that has fallen short. The project needs at least $12.8 million in pledges to access some additional state funding, but it has fallen short of that goal. It only has about $4.1 million pledged and about $800,000 actually collected. And the department said that construction would be paused for at least July or until the funding is resolved.
Were there warning signs, Amy, that the fundraising hasn't been keeping pace even before construction began?
Well, I requested all of the meeting minutes of a committee that's been advising this project. And there was a meeting in May of 2025 where the director of the Historical Society referred to the project being at a crossroads. At the time, the fundraising update was about $7.75 million. Although in an interview, one of the principals with PACE Fundraising told me he was aware of another $2 million pledge that was still being finalized. So at the time, it was roughly over $9 million in pledges was what they kind of thought they had to work with. And so at the time, the fundraisers indicated they had 90% confidence that the project would be able to reach a milestone of 12.8 million in time for the groundbreaking. And so then the committee took a vote and it was unanimous to proceed with the groundbreaking that July. But as I reported, really the peak amount of money they've been able to raise has been about 9.4, and then another $5 million pledge was rescinded, which brought that down to about the $4 million we're at today.
Do we understand why this hurdle of trying to raise $39 million hasn't been met?
The director of the Historical Society cited some financial headwinds. In particular, tariffs was one of the reasons that he gave. And that's because they're really going after corporate fundraising. And so some of the donors that they're targeting have been impacted by tariffs. Another factor is just the oil prices being down. That was the reason for the $5 million pledge that rescinded, and the difficult ag economy, just kind of the different economic factors going on right now have made it challenging. And PACE Fundraising also pointed out that they are hearing a little bit of fatigue from some of these big corporate donors who also, pledged some big donations to the Theodore Roosevelt Presidential Library and they're still paying on those pledges. And so some donors indicated that they needed some time before they were able to make another commitment.
Amy, your reporting has expressed that some lawmakers have expressed frustration that construction was allowed to proceed without enough private money committed. What concerns have you heard?
Yeah, I think lawmakers are frustrated because they're in a difficult position now. They wanted this to be a 50-50 public-private partnership. The state had committed $39.2 million, and the expectation was that private fundraising would be $38.8 million. But now that this project is a year into construction, it's on the Capitol grounds, the lawmakers are in a tough spot if this fundraising falls short.
So others are continuing to support the project despite the setback then? And is that why they just want to stay the course because it's already started?
Well, I don't know what conversations might be happening behind the scenes. I expect that if they were to try to scale back the project in some way, it might be even more expensive because you'd have additional architecture costs and design costs, and it might be too far along to really to change the plan. Um, I think the other reason that people want to stay the course is that there is a lot of enthusiasm for the project, which, as you said, is intended to be a world-class addition to the Heritage Center. Its goal is to honor 4,000 North Dakotans who have lost their lives in the line of service. And one of their goals is to inspire a new generation of North Dakotans to serve their country. And so because there are a lot of reasons to support the project and be excited about the project, I think the goal is to continue working on those fundraising efforts to try to turn this around.
During my conversation with Amy Dalrymple, she's with the North Dakota Monitor, and this segment is called A Closer Look with the Monitor. We're talking about construction that has been halted at the state's military gallery, and that's, of course, in Bismarck. Amy, do we know how much taxpayer money has been committed or spent, and what happens to those public dollars? Well, construction is just on hold.
Yes. So in the 2025 session, the legislature committed $39.2 million. 4.2 million has already been spent. That was to help repay a previous line of credit that was used for the architecture and the planning and design. The legislature also approved a $20 million line of credit through the Bank of North Dakota. The military gallery has expended that $20 million is according to what the Historical Society director told me. But lawmakers still have to come back in 2027 and vote to repay that line of credit, not including interest. It was the legislative intent for the state to repay that. So that will be another conversation next year. And then the $15 million was the next chunk of money that was approved. That has not been accessed, and that's just on hold unless the project can meet the requirement of reaching the $12.8 million fundraising goal.
Amy, I'm guessing that there must be indications that state leaders could be or maybe already have been asked to provide additional public funding if the private fundraising continues to lag. Is that accurate?
I don't know that they've been asked that so far, but Senator Brad Beckedal, who chairs the Senate Appropriations Committee, he told me that since this is a state-owned building on state property, that the state will likely have some responsibility to try to get that project complete. The other chunk of money, which is smaller in comparison, but the legislation didn't really indicate who's going to pay the interest on that $20 million line of credit. Senator Beckedal said, I think the hope was that fundraising might cover that, but now I would guess it probably is looking like the state is going to have to also pay that interest, which is expected to be in the millions, I would think.
Beyond the dollars, does this raise broader questions about how North Dakota should approach large public-private projects in the future?
Well, I think lawmakers are going to have far greater scrutiny of public-private partnerships in the future, and they could add additional requirements. In this one, there was at one point in the legislative session discussion of requiring 50% of the fundraising goal and requiring that it had actually be collected rather than pledged. That wasn't ultimately what got approved. It got reduced to a third, and it was based on pledges. But it's challenging for these projects that have pledges that are paid out over 5 years, but they need funding right away to be able to pay their contractors. So you might see more discussion of trying to tie it to actual donations collected rather than pledges.
Amy, does this delay have implications for veterans organizations or donors or even the State Historical Society, all of whom have invested certainly time and credibility in the project?
I'm sure there will be a lot of pressure on supporters to help identify some more private funding sources. Some of the meeting minutes that I reviewed from this past May showed that they were taking a lot of steps to try to avoid this pause in construction. The North Dakota National Guard Foundation contributed an additional $500,000 this spring to try to prevent that pause in construction. So I think, that will be just kind of a lot of pressure. It also could spur a donor to come forward that maybe wasn't aware of the project, and a donor could come forward and want to see this project resume, and it could get going again. So it could, it's hard to know what might come next.
So what are the milestones to watch? Is there a realistic path to restart construction, or could this become a much longer pause?
Well, on Monday, I talked to Senate Majority Leader David Hogue, and he said that in the next couple of weeks, legislative leaders were going to be having some meetings with the Historical Society, try to identify what those next steps are. So we'll certainly report on that once we know more. I think there's going to be a really tough budget section meeting in September where some tough questions are probably going to be asked by lawmakers, trying to find out what went wrong and what options there are. If construction is paused longer than a month, that could mean that construction gets even more expensive if there's additional work happening in the winter. It's also unclear what might happen to contracts that the state has for construction. So I think the longer the pause is, probably the more complicated this will be.
Amy Dalrymple, she's the editor-in-chief of the North Dakota Monitor. And you can always read her reporting and the reporting of her colleagues on not only this developing story, but a lot of things, most things about North Dakota state government at northdakotamonitor.com. Amy, I appreciate you helping us better understand where the Military Gallery project stands and what questions are out there. Thanks for joining us on A Closer Look with the Monitor.
Thanks for having me, Craig.